How do you do? Welcome to Likely Stories. Because of this virtual event, many of you are here for the first time. Wonderful. And to all of you who've been returning for over 15 years, we're virtually brand new. My name is Emily Zacharias. I'm a longtime trustee of the Adult School of South Orange and Maplewood, New Jersey. It's one of the oldest adult schools in the country, here since 1933. It's been honored as a local legacy by the Library of Congress in recognition of its invaluable cultural contribution. So let me tell you what Likely Stories is. Tonight, you'll hear 3 stories. We'll be together for about an hour. A short play by Colin Neeson, an excerpt from The Anthologist by Nicholson Baker, and a short story by David Means. The stories will be introduced by musicians soloing. Storytelling is about the connections between us all, and connection is what the adult school does too, through affordable classes, lectures, and special programming like tonight for 88 years. The adult school is a storied place, and like writer T.C. Boyle says, we are composed of stories. And like all nonprofits, we're struggling, and tonight's performance is a fundraiser. Thank you for buying your ticket. I'd like to speak briefly at the end and explain something of why the adult school has enjoyed such a long story. Yeah, there will be a giving opportunity. Enjoy Likely Stories.
What's your emergency?
Hi, I work from home.
Okay, is anyone else there with you, sir?
No, I'm alone.
And when's the last time you saw someone else? Was that today?
My wife this morning, I guess.
Anyone else?
I don't think so. Oh, well, the mailman, but that was through the blinds. I don't know if that counts.
I'm afraid not. I'm going to ask you to open the blinds, okay? Let's go ahead and let some light in.
How much light?
Just a little is fine.
Okay. Oh, I did it. Oh, it is bright. It feels so bright on my face.
That's good. That's how it's supposed to feel. I need you to tell me what you're wearing, okay?
Just regular clothes.
Okay. Outside clothes or inside clothes?
Hold on. I'll check. Pajamas. I'm wearing my pajamas. I could swear I changed into regular. I thought these were jeans.
It's okay, sir. Calm down.
Well, this isn't even a shirt. It's my skin. God damn it.
So just pajama bottoms then. Can we assume that you haven't showered today?
I don't know.
I need you to walk over to the bathroom and see if your towel is damp. Okay? Can you do that for me?
I think so.
Great.
Okay. I'm walking over there. Okay, I'm here. I'm in the bathroom. I see my towel.
Sir? Sir.
It's dry.
Okay, that's okay. Let's get you back over to the window where the light is, all right? Walk toward the light. What's your name, sir?
Robert.
Hi, Robert. I'm Charisse.
Hi, Charisse.
You did the right thing by calling today, Robert. I'm going to get some people over there soon to help you, okay? And I'll stay with you on the phone until they get there. Do you understand?
I think so.
Okay. Now, Robert, did you eat anything today?
Yes, many times.
Are you eating right now, Robert?
I keep putting things in my mouth a lot.
Okay. Can you tell me what food you've eaten today?
You mean everything?
Yes.
I don't know exactly. I mean, I started out with breakfast before my wife left for work. Scrambled eggs with toast and coffee. And then I think I maybe had a bowl of cereal when she left.
Is that it?
Like an hour or so later, I had banana with peanut butter.
Did you slice the banana?
No, I dipped it right into the jar because no one was watching. No one watches.
So no plate or anything.
No,
And that was it until lunch.
no.
What else did you have?
I made a quesadilla. Another bowl of cereal, I think, and some pretzels, the flat ones that are like chips. I love those.
Those are good. And did you have lunch after that, or was that lunch?
I remember ham. Lots of ham.
In a sandwich?
No, no sandwich, just ham pieces. Oh, there were also some spoonfuls of chocolate frosting. One or two green peppers, I think, and yogurt. A large tub of yogurt. Peach.
Okay, Robert, you understand that what you just described isn't really lunch, right?
Oh, it is lunch when there are no rules. It is lunch, Charisse.
Did you at any point dip the green peppers in the peach yogurt?
Probably. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Now, Robert, did you get any work done today?
I don't think so. I think I was supposed to make a deck for the meeting, and I started it. I started the deck.
And then you stopped.
The internet has fun things for me to do. So I did them. I think I played some guitar too. Oh, and I separated all the dimes from my change jar, which took a while.
Why did you do that?
I have 479 dimes.
Anything else?
Then I got sucked into watching a YouTube video about meerkats.
A documentary.
Yeah. And then that led me to other videos that weren't documentaries. But it's not important.
So you started to watch pornography?
Yes,
You went from meerkats straight to pornography?
that's right. Yeah.
And how long did you spend watching videos?
It doesn't matter because I make my own schedule, you know? Charisse? Charisse? Charisse?
I understand. I understand. Now, since you didn't get any work done, do you think you may have exercised today?
I don't remember. It's possible, I guess.
Can you look around the house for me and tell me if you see any signs that you may have exercised? Sneakers, gym shorts, thigh master, anything?
I don't see anything. I don't think. Oh, I see a yoga mat.
Oh, okay, good. Is it your yoga mat? Robert, I need you to stay with me, okay? The EMT should be there shortly, and I'm going to need you to let them in. Can you do that?
Okay.
You mentioned a meeting earlier. What time is your meeting today, Robert?
4:30.
Okay. Okay. Well, the EMTs are going to help you get that deck ready and get you showered and changed.
Oh, it's just a conference call.
Regardless, they'll help tidy things up around there before your wife gets back. Okay, Robert?
Thank you.
But until they get there, no more eating and no more meerkat videos. Okay?
I work from home.
Shh, 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 shh. I know. I know you do.
Here's the thing. I'm basically willing to do anything. I'm willing to do anything to come up with a really good poem. I want to do that. That's my goal in life, and it hasn't happened. I've waited patiently. Sometimes I've waited impatiently. Sometimes I've striven. I've made some acceptable poems, published poems that have been accepted in a literal sense, but not one single really good poem. I understand what's wrong with me when I look at the lives of the poets. They were willing to make sacrifices that I'm not willing to make. They were so tortured, so messed up. I'm only a little messed up. I'm tortured to the point where I don't sleep very well sometimes, and I don't answer mail as I should. Sometimes I feel a languor of spirit when I get an email asking me to do something. Also, I've run up a significant credit card debt, but that's not real self-torture. I mean, if you stand back from my life just a little, maybe 35 yards, I'm a completely conventional person. Most of us have a short period of intense thinking about poetry when we take a class in college, and then that's about it. And that's really all you need. One intense time when you master your little heap of names. Andrew Marvell, Muriel Rukeyser, Gwendolyn Brooks, Deborah Garrison, Lucille Clifton, whoever, Robert Hayden, Selima Hill, whoever they may be. If you've memorized some poems, the poems will raise a glimmering finger in your memory once in a while. And that's very nice so long as you keep it to yourself, never recite. If you recite, your listeners will look down and play with their cuticles. They will not like you. But sometimes if you quote just a phrase in passing like this, as Selima Hill says, a really good fuck makes me feel like custard. That can work. After college, there may be later phases as well where you suddenly get interested in writing poems. What I'm doing when I'm writing poetry is I'm trying to make a little side salad, just the right amount of sprouts on the top, maybe a chickpea or two, no bacon, maybe a slice of egg. Doesn't feel like writing at all. If you're writing, say, a book review or an essay, it's sequential. You find a place to start, which becomes the beginning, and then you wander off in search of the end. But with a poem, you're in the middle, and then you're at the end, and then you're back at the beginning, all with your eyes. You're always looking at that same piece of paper, one single piece of paper stretched out in front of you as big as the salt flats of Utah. I got a tart email from my editor, Gene. He wanted to know where the introduction was. The subject line of his email was whip cracking. So I went back up to the barn with my white plastic chair. I have a long table on the second floor with the manuscript of Only Rhyme on it. That's the name of my anthology, Only Rhyme. Gene sent me the cover art, the catalog copies, already written, already published. It says, Paula Chowder's introduction locates rhyming poetry in its historical context and reawakens our sense of the fructifying limitlessness of traditional forms. No, it doesn't. Fruc doesn't do anything because it doesn't exist. I haven't written the introduction. I looked up at the tie beams in the barn. There's some empty wasps' nests up there. I looked down at my black flip-flops and I looked over at the mobile green leafage out the long, thin window and I wrote, it's a strange experience assembling an anthology. No, the anthology is not about me. Why would they care about me? But actually, it is a strange experience. It's absorbing work because you have to decide over and over whether you're willing to stand behind a poem or not. And yet it's not your poem. It's somebody else's poem written in somebody else's country, in somebody else's century. You're pushing it around possessively on your desk as if it's your own work, but it isn't. And then you winnow it out. You winnow it right out the window. Why? Because you are determined that this isn't going to be one of those anthologies where you think, now, why is that poem there? No, this is going to be an anthology where every poem you alight on and read, you say, oh, holy God, dang, that is good. That is so good and so twisty and so shadowy and so chewy and so boomerangy that it requires the forging of a new word for beauty. It is so good you immediately have to start reading it in a whisper to yourself so you can really hear it that good. And you note with a pang that the poem you're judging now doesn't reach that level. So you cut it out, exit out, it's gone out. And it hurts to see it go because you know that the ones you cut will later seem like the ones you really loved, while the ones you keep will inevitably lose some of their luster through overhandling. But you keep on going because you're a professional anthologist. And when it's all done and you flip through, you look at one of the poems you've picked and you realize that there was really just one line in it. And that was the reason you included it. The rest of the poem isn't as good. For instance, they flee from me that sometime did me seek. Or give me my scallop shell of quiet. Or ye littles lie more close. And you think maybe I should have made an anthology of single lines. Would that have worked? But then, if you stare for a while at one of the single lines, stare into its rippling depths, you realize that there's usually one particular word in that line that slays you. That word is so shockingly great. Maybe it's the word sometime. They flee from me that sometime did me seek. Or maybe it's the word quiet. Give me my scallop shell of quiet. Do you hear the way scallop is folded and absorbed into the word quiet? And then all of your amazement and all of your love for that whole poem coalesces around that one word quiet. And so you think, maybe I should make a poetry anthology of individual words like this. Sometime, Thomas Wyatt. Or quiet, Sir Walter Raleigh. And of course, that's not going to work. That's just a bunch of disembodied words plucked from great poems. I always secretly want it to rhyme. Don't you, some of you? Admit it. And this thought inevitably takes me back to my life as a craven fourth grader. We're all sitting in class at these new desks. This was the 60s, and there were some new desks that had recently come in, which had nice metal casters. They moved very smoothly over the linoleum floor. They slid, and we're sitting in these smooth sliding desks. Sun was pouring in, and I'm sitting in the class breathing, wondering, what's the teacher going to think of next? What's she going to teach us? Anything? And then she says, and now, children, today we're going to write a poem in something called free verse. It can be a poem about bumblebees or a poem about shadows. It can be a poem about making muffins, an egg hatching, the woodpecker's eye. It can be a poem about anything fun and beautiful and deep and sad and wondrous and strange and true and perfect and maybe even a little bit frightening. And you have to write it. And here's the one thing I'm going to tell you. This is the wisdom. Are you ready, children? It doesn't have to rhyme. And I sat there in my chair with the very smooth casters, and I thought, what does she mean it doesn't have to rhyme? It does have to rhyme. It's got to rhyme. Where did little Miss Muffet sit? On a cushion? Did she sit on a love seat? No, little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet. But I said nothing. I went ahead and I wrote a poem. It was free verse, but it had one rhyme at the end. I was watching the kitchen sink. There was a droplet of water quivering at the end of the tap before falling into the land they call disposal. It was a terrible poem that was remarkably easy to write and which my mother liked. And that was the beginning of my career. It's almost time for bed. And here's what I do. I sleep with my books. And I know that's kind of weird and solitary, but it's very cozy. Over a period of 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 20 nights of sleeping, you've taken all these books to bed with you, and you fall asleep and the books are there. And they're lying in their learning piles, and sometimes they slip off and nudge me in the eyebrow with one of their corners. Sometimes they get roiled up with the pillows and the blankets, and I never make the bed. And so it's like a stew of books. The bed is the liquid medium. It's the Campbell's chunky soup of books. The bed you eat with a fork. And when I'm there, I might peruse the latest issue of some swanky literary magazine. You locate the poem. There it is. You take in the title. Way too much. Way too much. Okay. How are you going to approach this poem? Let's just glance at the first phrase. I try to sit up straight, and then you break away, you go down the words on the right-hand side. And now, you know, it doesn't rhyme. Once again, they've stabbed me in the goddamn lung. But, all right, that's fine. It's a plum, not a poem. That's what I call a poem that doesn't rhyme. It's a plum. And we who write and publish our non-rhyming plums aren't poets. We're plumbers. Call out the names in the procession of the loved. Call from the blood, the ancestors here to bear witness to the day he stopped the car. We on our way to a great banquet in his honor. In a field, a cow groaned low, trying to give birth, what he called front leg presentation. The calf came out nose first, one front leg dangling from his mother. A fatal sign, he said, while rolling up the sleeves of his dress shirt, and climbed the fence. I watched him thrust his arms entire into the yet-to-be, where I imagined holy sparrows scattering in the hall of souls for his big mortal hands just to make way. With his whole weight, he pushed the calf back in the mother and grasped the other leg tucked up like a closed wing against the new one's shoulder, and found a way in the warm dark to bring both legs out into the world together. Then heaved and pulled, the cow arching her back until a bull calf in a whoosh of blood and water came falling whole and still onto the meadow. We rubbed his blackness, blooding our hands. The mother licked her newborn of us oblivious until he moved a little, struggled. I ran to get our coats, mine green velvet and his tuxedo jacket, and worked to rub the new one dry while he set out to find the farmer. When it was over, the new calf suckling his mother, the farmer soon to lead them to the barn, leaving our coats just where they lay. We huddled in the car and then made love toward eternity. Without a word, drove slowly home and loved some more.
From a wide vantage, two hospital workers, somewhat lonely-looking figures, taking a smoke break back behind a trailer, leaning toward each other as they talked softly beside a row of neatly trimmed bushes. One had long hair and thin, pale arms that dangled from her scrubs. The other was big, burly, with a tattoo on his arm. Even that day in June, if you paid close attention driving past, you might have seen desire in the way she pointed her toe and dug it into the dusty concrete while she listened to him. Or you might have noticed the way he swayed as he talked, because he liked to riff on the subject at hand. And lately, the last few times when she visited with the trailer, he had expounded upon the recent news. A serial killer nurse who'd confessed to murdering somewhere in Pennsylvania at least a dozen patients. She, for her part, added a little commentary here and there because it was a shared story and she liked his deep, no-nonsense tone, which she thought might have come from his stint in the army. He had green eyes that became deeply serious when he was listening.
The bond began to form in the way they both moved during the breaks. In the solitude they sought between the bushes and the long flank of the trailer, a dirty sliver of parking lot curb where cigarette butts and litter had blown up. Between them was a secretive energy, a conspiracy formed out of a mutual history, or maybe the conspiracy formed a sense of mutual history. As a kid, she had lived in one of those motels, Holiday Court, and had turned itself over to a long-term renters. The daughter of a fuck-up mom with zero parenting skills. A kind, encouraging counselor at her high school named Mrs. Hargrove, who gave her hope, urged her to take a heroic leap to the community college, and then nursing school on a scholarship. He'd grown up in Nevada near a town called Ely on the Shoshone Reservation, without a father, spending a lot of time in the countryside, staying out of his mom's way, and then suddenly, they moved east to a trashy apartment in Newburgh, New York, with his dad, who liked to drink as much as his mother did.
The kidney pounder, as she liked to call it, was inside the trailer. Technically, the pounder's called a lithotripsy machine, she said. It delivers shockwaves and breaks up the stones. Around the metropolitan area and sometimes in upstate New York, she followed the trailer to cut-rate hospitals, adjusting the Velcro straps, and then she'd work the device, pushing as gently as possible while the pulsing waves of ultrasonic energy broke the stone apart.
The scar that ran down his neck, just missing his carotid artery, she noticed, and disappeared beneath his scrubs when she asked him about it, an excuse to talk about the war. The time an IED hit his Hummer, blowing a tire off the vehicle, sending shrapnel through the undercarriage into his buddy's arm. Bleeding bad, his friends screamed that he was dying, but it was only the fog of war shit. I guess I'm gonna live, his buddy said, when he finally realized that his arm was still there. I guess I'm okay, Chief.
Kidney Boy was this kid, barely 20, a junkie from the looks of it, suffering for a couple of weeks while the trailer was way up north, licking a morphine lollipop with a big stone, meaning like the worst case. A kid had this crooked jaw from a bad rewire, and when I unstrapped him, he kissed me and he said I saved his life. Said it like he meant it, and I tried not to let him see it in my eyes, you know? The things I was seeing about his future, she told Marlon one day.
He leaned forward and listened to her without a word.
Kidney Boy said, I'm not going to make it, and she assured him that he would, but heard the truth in his voice and saw it in his eyes. You know how that is, she said. He was seeing what I saw, but couldn't tell him.
Nothing good could come from the intimacy of those post-treatment moments. When the patient was disoriented by a joyous sensation of relief, he thought. That was when they did some weird shit, just reaching out to touch you, saying something about putting you in their will, or even in some cases, lashing out for no good reason, because you were bearer of good tidings. He resisted giving her the standard nurse-to-nurse talk about not internalizing pain of the patients, how they come and go fleetingly. I mean, the ones you think are going to live end up dead, and the ones you're sure are going to die, who have death in their eyes, end up living. processed out and sent in their merry way. Then the sensation of going outside for a break and seeing that, although inside a patient is just grunted and gone into cardiac arrest with a no assist order, the sky, filled with the clouds and sunlight and birds, is still throwing itself majestically over the world.
She cried about Kidney Boy, and he drew her close, giving her a chance to glance down through the blue light of his shirt at a switchyard of ridges where the scar opened up into the crater where the frag had gone in.
The trailer arrived every few weeks that summer, and they texted each other and met.
Itinerant life, following the trailer from one town to the next, staying in budget hotels, watching television alone in the evenings, didn't bother her much. Because before holiday court, she and her mother had traveled around a lot, following one asshole after another, and she got used to it, she said one afternoon, brushing her hair away from her forehead and gazing over his shoulder at a hill across the parking lot, where tombstones rose up into the trees. It seemed pretty typical, putting a graveyard next to a hospital.
The dead had names that stuck in the mind, whereas those of the ones who were cured were released, sent back into the clean, raw rotation of the stars, so to speak, he said. There was always some patient in critical condition, doomed and marked terminal on the charts, who overcame the odds and marched out of the ward surrounded by his family, not even waving goodbye, taking a name off into the future. Marlon liked her white arms and the way her breast swayed beneath the fabric of her scrubs. And he thought, when she and the trailer were gone, about the way her ass shifted when she walked, just throwing a compaction from one side to the other, revealing a complication of form that begged to be touched, giving him, during the lonely nights in his shitty apartment, something to imagine. Just falling to his knees and extending out his arms like one of those mythic figures offering a baby to the sun or to a god, gently cradling each side of her.
Gracie admired the bulk of his body and his dark skin and his muscular heft in combination with the way he shifted from foot to foot when he was standing, and the way when he was on the curb smoking, he looked beyond her to some point on the horizon that nobody could see, pulling his long black hair tighter into the regulation ponytail, holding his head, and the way he assumed a weird regal formality, stopping to bow to her as he emerged from the emergency room doors, sweeping his arm out to the side, looking grim and lonely until he unleashed his smile in a way that seemed vulnerable and tough all at the same time.
Shoshone folk loved the wolf, he told her one afternoon when she asked him about life in Ely, Nevada. Wolf could bring people back to life, but he didn't do it because there were too many people in the world if he did. I mean, I'm not sure how the story goes, but it's something like that, he said, and it was about the only thing my mother ever really told me about our people.
Half-hour breaks adding up, one after another, over 4 months.
The loneliest road in America is Route 50 in Nevada. It goes through Ely. Driving, it's like losing your soul and getting another one, my mom used to say. My father drove out 50 and disappeared for a year. And he came back saying that he'd never got off it. I mean, the road, I mean. And she left him, or he left her. I mean, or they left each other. I've got 50 versions of that story. Riffing about the serial killer nurse, expounded it on something he'd read online about this male nurse adjusting morphine drips and rewriting charts covering his tracks. By that point, she had given him the entire Kidney Boy story and how she'd seen in his eyes what he would do. A few days later, he told one about his buddy who was killed in Iraq. I mean, same old story. IED blasting up through the undercarriage. The light went out of his eyes.
Play it out, she was saying. He was hunching his shoulders, his face buried in his hands. The way I see it, the serial killer can take or leave the death part because what he really likes is scoping out the possibilities. You go in and for a minute, even if you try not to, you feel the life in your hand and you become aware that one little fuck up on a chart or a misreading and the patient could die, he said. looking out over the road, streaming his smoke between his teeth, his eyes on the horizon and his chin jutting.
On the steps of a trailer a few days later, picking up on the subject of the serial killer nurse, he began to talk again about the impulse to kill, about how he'd learned in Fallujah that impulse equals mess, and how there was this guy in the unit who plugged shots whenever he saw fit. One day, some old lady came from around the corner with her hands in the air. I mean, we just hated corners, he said, which was one of the reasons why we hated Fallujah. And this guy in our unit just popped her. When we got close to that body, we saw that she had these arthritic hands, just fingers curled. So a hand held up like that might have looked like a gun.
Beautiful. Inside that moment, his voice quivering, his eyes welling, and the wind was rising and the darker clouds were coming in. His eyes were painfully green as the grief twisted his face, and the trees near the road gave off a sugary odor, and tenderness formed in the quiet. How long was that moment, held in memory between the two of them for the rest of their lives?
Finally, he spoke and said, my grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis, and I used to go with her to Ely to this clinic where she would put her hands into the wax bath until she had like blue wax gloves. And he shook a cigarette from his pack and lit it up. He just sat and listened to the sounds of summer, looking over the bushes at the baseball diamond and beyond it, at the top of the school and the white cupola in the sky. When he spoke again, he explained that the dead lady on the street in Fallujah had hands just like his grandmother's, and then he began to cry, starting with a single low gasp and a collapse of his shoulders as he buried his face, and she pulled him close.
One hopes for the great love born of common pain, for two united souls sharing grief in long, easy banter while they fend off physical attraction and misread each other until everything seems to change. One afternoon, smoking behind the trailer on a particularly rough day, a triaged bus accident that included a woman who came in with a story to tell about her previous stones. And then, just after she finished that story, a bloom of smoke emerged in the early autumnal sky. The incinerated aftermath of old bandages and bloodied towels and whatever else could be burned to save the hospital disposal fees.
One afternoon in September, he said, I love hearing your stories. I love your stories too, she said, touching his shoulder.
We should get out of here after this shift. Take a drive, he said, shrugging his shoulder back toward the emergency entrance where the orderlies were removing a gurney from a truck. And she waited to answer because she wanted him to beg a little, to hear how much his desire had accrued over the weeks, small hand brushes and gestures, one to the next, and because she took care with matters of the heart, the past having taught her that a hit could come as easily as a kiss.
They drove up the old state road through autumn dusk, talking softly and listening to music as the river appeared and disappeared to the right. And she fiddled with the old radio, moving the pointer as it slid from station to station. They both felt the sensation of going north, while he told stories about growing up, the gangs that ruled his neighborhood, the way they used to play along the river and then around the switchbacks of the Storm King. And passing through the desolation of Newburgh, he said, I think that this here is probably the loneliest road in America. And they headed out of town, continuing north as the road opened into 4 lanes and then back down to 2, skirting old estates and monasteries until they reached a small hotel painted pink, with a quivering neon sign that said River Rest, something from an old movie.
No, wait, before they got to the hotel, they stopped at a diner, sharing a meal, and then in the parking lot, they smoked and leaned back, gazing up at the stars. And if you'd been looking, you would have seen two people lingering in an upstate parking lot, kissing each other gently, and you would have extrapolated a story from that image.
No, wait, there were a lot of other conversations. Late in the summer and early in the fall, as they started out on the road in the ball field in the sky, testing each other, teasing, griping about work and life in general, sharing deeper stories that will never be recorded, well, not here, and not in memory. So that later, looking back, it would seem that in the fall, on a cold afternoon, they had both decided on a whim to take the leap, to hook up, to go to the future together, to consummate the hesitant, careful nature of their personalities, because they were both damaged, somehow lost and sensed and felt, if you'd been watching, a sudden deep need for each other.
No, wait, go back to the afternoon she told him the kidney boy story. The things that were withheld and the things that were expressed, the way she told Marlon how she imagined the kid, whose name was Kurt, going up to the bridge, standing on the railing and looking straight ahead at the bend in the river, the beautiful vista. Go back to the way the exchange transpired, almost wordlessly, but not quite, that afternoon between Marlon and Gracie, and how he said, of course, after she told him Kidney Boy's real name, Kurt. And then he laughed and said, all those stoners of short names like Hank, Kurt, Al. How did Kurt die? He said it before she could tell him the fact. Not so much guessing as seeming to have a prophetic insight. And she said, hey, how'd you know? And he shrugged and looked away and listened as she explained that Kurt had jumped from a bridge. And then, right then, the wind lifted and there was the high, metallic, and beautiful sound of kids playing before she began to cry.
No, wait. Go back to the way he emerged from sliding glass doors at his army fatigues, over his scrubs with his hood pulled up around his face, criminally sad as if it were like deep in thought, until he got near the trailer. It pulled his hood down and just shook his head, just let out his hair. And then he said, hey. And then he gave her a hug. And while she held the story, she wanted to tell him about the crazy old lady up in Poughkeepsie, because she always had one bottled up. And that was part of the dynamic. Just the urge to talk to him and to hear him back.
No, wait, go back behind the trailer to that particularly rough day, a triaged bus accident, 2 DOA and 1 double amputee for him, and for her, an old man with a stone the size of the Hope Diamond. And then Gracie told Marlon about her mom, about the way her stepfather had beaten them both, and then about Roy, the guy at Holiday Court, this wiry older guy who had a motorcycle and took her for rides. And then she stopped speaking and she let Marlon see in her face the things she wanted him to see, that she had suffered at the hands of Roy.
No, wait, go to the moment when suddenly out of the blue, like a freak snow squall had appeared from the cloudless sky. And he said it was a good omen. And she told him he was full of shit. Then she fell into a hysterical laughing fit together once again. And the EMS came roaring in, siren whooping, as to counterpoint their joy and delight with the urgency of some other realm. How that moment somehow sealed the fate between them within the shared eternity of these moments. No, wait. Go back to that afternoon when he said, we should get out of this place. We should get away from this joint. And he shrugged and a shoulder back toward the emergency entrance, where with the clank and clattering sound, they were removing a gurney from the truck, and she waited a few beats to answer Marlon because she wanted him to say it again, to beg a little bit, to see just how much desire had accrued over the weeks. From one small hand brush to another, from one gesture to the next, because that's all she had in the end. All she had. She sometimes felt was the small accumulations one upon the next, because the past had taught her to take care with all of that, to be frugal with the matters of the heart. A hit could come as easily as a kiss. Just a back of a hand could arrive at a moment's notice. The physics was in her bones. In a way, she drew herself slightly away. She felt herself with the breeze blowing in her hair around her eyes, withdrawing a little bit from the pliant urgency in his voice when he told her he just felt like getting away. So when she waited until he added, I'm not hitting on you, all right? I'm just proposing a drive up the river. They both laughed at that. She waited a few more beats and then said, sure. Which was, he thought, the most beautiful word in the world.
So now they were in a bed, in the shadowy hotel light, listening to the occasional car passing on the road.
On the sagging bed, he heaved into her, lifting himself up on his hands, while she held her shoulders, her fingers sliding around to feel the scar coming down from around his neck and channeling out to form a crater-like hollow. And she drew on her time from nursing school, testing the tissue where the shrapnel went in and stayed in and burned phosphorus white, hot enough, thank God, to cauterize the wound and seal off the blood vessel. She pushed against him, forgetting his scars, until the two motions spun into what seemed to be an airless freedom.
A soft weeping sound, as close to crying as you could get. And when she made that sound, he made it too, and together they were making one sound. And then he rested his weight against her and recalled her hand fluttering, reminding him of the old woman's hand and of his grandmother's too. He felt sure he would tell her what had really happened to the old lady in Fallujah, or at least later, much later, years later, he'd see that image and use it to justify having told her about it.
Deep in the night, he nudged her awake and explained that he was the one who'd gone trigger happy on the old lady in Fallujah, shooting her as she came around the corner on raw impulse instead of thought, taking her out from 20 yards away.
He cried against her shoulder as she said softly, "It's all right, Marlon. You're here now and it's going to work out. You're a damn good nurse." And then it seemed as if all she'd ever learned on the job came into play as she spoke soothingly to him, making a gentle patting motion on his back, the kind of gesture you'd use to calm a baby at night. A gentle, repeated pat, not too soft, not too hard.
So that the deepest enigmatic meaning would seem to stay around that image, not just of the two of them crying together, but also of the hand itself, as it fluttered alone, which had led to his admission, and for that image would hold another meaning, because she would remember it too, vaguely, and replicate the motion countless times over the year, just as she'd often backtracked through her memory of that summer and fall, drawing on the random moments, trying to find the origin point of their love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the stories, the performances of this glorious group of New York actors living the life in Jersey, and the wonderful musicians. Everyone was so generous. The largest mountain of thanks to my friend Dan Strickler, who made Likely Stories Online possible. Ditto to Dan Zacharias. For these 88 years, the adult school has brought many communities together through lifelong learning. Our affordable classes have continued online during the pandemic, but not all of our programming is transferable. Our summer session that serves 700 children and creates 70 first-time jobs for teenagers will likely face a compromised second summer. We've tightened our belt, cut our staff, and of course, continue to reinvent ourselves. One last thing. In our classrooms, people of all ages come for skill development or to excite an interest. Once there, something else happens. The people in our classrooms don't look alike, sound alike, or necessarily have the same educational profiles. They come in as strangers. Very quickly, they find the camaraderie of a shared goal, which creates a shared experience. It's a new story. I've seen it happen in every class I've taught in the last 10 years. Everyone lifts each other up. Is there any real learning without community? Connections like these are the bedrock of our relevance. It has never been more essential than now. I hope you'll donate. And thank you for being here with Likely Stories.